Camel bells echo across a sea of shifting sand. This was the sound of the ancient Silk Road, a network of pathways so dangerous that few who traveled it ever revealed their full stories. Today, we are uncovering those long-lost secrets. You will learn the hidden survival strategies and clandestine knowledge that allowed merchants and explorers to cross continents against impossible odds. How did they navigate trackless deserts without maps? What coded messages did they leave behind in the rocks? What is the one survival secret you would have needed to make this journey yourself? That rhythmic clanging of camel bells was not a random noise. It was a disciplined cadence, a signal directed by the single most important person on the journey, the caravan master. This individual was far more than a simple guide. He was a strategist, a diplomat, and a keeper of secrets, and his most powerful tool was not a weapon, but a book. He carried a hidden ledger, a document whose true value was measured in lives, not coins. On the surface, it appeared to be a simple accounting of goods, a list of silk bolts and spice sacks. But between those lines, written in a coded script only he and his trusted successors could understand, lay the true map of survival. This ledger detailed forgotten paths that bypassed the territories of the most ruthless bandit clans. It pinpointed secluded oases, their locations a closely guarded secret from rival traders. Most dangerously, it contained meticulous records of payments, bribes made to local chieftains, and even to the bandit lords themselves, a necessary evil to purchase safe passage through their domains. This book was a chronicle of compromises and clandestine agreements that kept the caravan moving. It was so vital, so incendiary, that its protection was paramount. A caravan master would often defend this ledger with his own life, for its loss would mean not just financial ruin, but the certain demise of any future expedition that relied on its secrets. This was not mere record-keeping. It was the absolute key to navigating a world where the price of a wrong turn was everything. But the caravan master's secret ledger was just one layer of communication. In a world where a single misunderstood word could spell disaster, survival depended on a shared language. This was not the formal tongue of scholars or emperors, but a rough and ready trade jargon, a linguistic tapestry woven from dozens of different dialects. Think of it as the world's first international business language, born from sheer necessity on the road. Merchants from Persia, travelers from China, and guides from the steppes had to find a common ground. They developed a pidgin language, a simplified mix of vocabulary and gestures that allowed them to bargain for camels, negotiate for supplies, and share the most critical information about the path ahead. It was a language of action and survival, stripped of all but the most essential words. Beyond these spoken exchanges, a more silent and secretive form of communication flourished. Experienced travelers developed a whole vocabulary of hand signals, used to convey messages across a crowded market or a noisy caravan without alerting potential thieves. A subtle tap on the nose might indicate a dishonest merchant. A certain way of folding one's arms could signal that the water at a nearby well was unsafe to drink. The most enduring messages, however, were carved in stone and wood. Along the most desolate stretches of the route, where a spoken warning would be lost to the wind, travelers left markers for those who followed. A series of notches on a specific tree might point toward a hidden spring. A peculiar arrangement of 3 stones could mean that bandits were active in the next valley. A symbol scratched into a rock face, looking like little more than casual graffiti to the untrained eye, was a clear and deliberate sign. It might indicate the direction to a safe cave for shelter or warn of a patch of treacherous, shifting sands. These symbols formed a secret code, a communal bulletin board maintained by generations of anonymous travelers. They were not signing their names, they were saving lives, leaving a silent guide for the next soul brave enough to venture into the great, silent expanse. Those silent stone markers guided the body, but another kind of knowledge protected the merchant's livelihood. While the caravan master navigated physical threats, the spice trader faced a different kind of danger, the risk of his priceless cargo becoming just another common commodity. His survival depended on a carefully crafted web of mystery and outright deception. The most valuable spices were not sold with simple truths. They were presented with epic tales designed to captivate the imagination and justify an exorbitant price. A merchant from Alexandria might swear that his precious black pepper was harvested from vines deep within valleys patrolled by winged, poisonous snakes. Another would claim his cinnamon was gathered from the nests of enormous birds high on unreachable mountain cliffs. These were not just sales pitches, they were strategic legends. By creating an aura of extreme danger and impossible geography around the origins of their goods, these traders transformed simple plants into objects of myth. The more fantastical the story, the higher the price they could command from wealthy nobles and kings who desired not just a seasoning, but a piece of the exotic unknown. This was the spice trader's true almanac, a mental ledger of fables more valuable than any map. Yet, beneath this layer of deliberate fiction lay a bedrock of profound, practical knowledge that was never shared with customers. These merchants understood that spices were tools of survival. A shipment of cloves was not just a fragrant bud. It was a powerful numbing agent for toothaches, a secret known to the traders long before it reached European apothecaries. Ginger was a remedy for stomach ailments, and peppercorns were not only for taste, but were used to preserve meat on long journeys. This hidden utility gave spices a dual value, making them a stable form of currency in a world of fluctuating coinage. A merchant could barter a sack of saffron for fresh camels, a chest of peppercorns for the protection of a local chieftain's soldiers, or a small pouch of nutmeg to pay a healer's services. The spice trade was not merely about flavor, it was a complex economy built on secrets, where a good story could make you rich, but the true, silent knowledge of a spice's power could save your life. The secrets of spice were valuable, but they paled in comparison to the most closely guarded treasure of the ancient world, Chinese silk. The empire's monopoly on this luminous fabric was protected not by ledgers or legends, but by the threat of death itself. For centuries, the Chinese enforced a brutal form of industrial espionage, making it a capital crime for anyone to smuggle silkworm eggs or the seeds of the mulberry trees they fed upon beyond their borders. The entire complex process, from cultivating the trees to unraveling the delicate cocoons and weaving the threads, was a state secret of immense economic and political power. To share this knowledge was treason, punishable by execution. This was a kingdom built on a single, fragile thread, and they guarded it with absolute ruthlessness. Yet, as with all great secrets, the human desire to possess it proved stronger than any law. The most enduring legend tells of a Chinese princess promised in marriage to a Central Asian king around the 6th century. She could not bear the thought of leaving her homeland without its most beautiful creation. Defying the emperor's edict, she devised a daring plan. She concealed silkworm eggs deep within her elaborate headdress and tucked precious mulberry seeds among her personal belongings. When she passed through the imperial checkpoints, the guards, out of respect, would never dare to scrutinize the headdress of a royal princess. In that single, brazen act, she smuggled an entire industry out of China. This was not the only tale of subterfuge. Monks were said to have hollowed out their walking staffs, filling them with silkworm eggs to carry the secret westward. These stories, whether entirely true or embellished by time, reveal a fundamental truth. Knowledge, especially knowledge as profitable as silk, is a fluid thing. It cannot be contained forever by borders or decrees. It travels with people, hidden in their hair, sewn into the hems of their clothes, or carried in their hearts. The empire's greatest fear was realized not by an army, but by a single, determined individual. The monopoly was broken, and the secret of silk began its slow, inexorable journey across the globe, forever changing the economies and cultures of every land it touched. Breaking the silk monopoly required more than just smuggled secrets. It demanded the ability to cross a landscape that offered no clear paths. Without maps or compasses, how did these travelers find their way across 1,000 miles of identical sand? Their navigation was a profound art, a deep conversation with the natural world. They were astronomers, reading the night sky with an intimacy we have largely forgotten. They did not see a random scattering of stars, but a fixed and rotating clock. The North Star, constant and unwavering, was their primary anchor, but they knew its position was not the whole story. They memorized entire constellations, understanding how their slow turn through the night and their shift across the seasons could mark the passing hours and confirm their direction of travel. This celestial knowledge was a living map, passed from master to apprentice over countless nights under the open desert sky. Yet the sky was only half of the guide. During the day, when the sun was a blinding force and the stars had vanished, the desert itself spoke to them. An experienced guide could read the language of the sand dunes. The wind, a constant sculptor, carved dunes into specific shapes that reliably indicated the prevailing wind direction. A dune's gentle slope always faced the windward side, while the steeper, crumbling slip face pointed downwind. By observing these forms, a traveler could calibrate their course, using the Earth's own breath as a compass. This knowledge was too vital to be left to chance or simple observation. It was encoded into culture, woven into the very fabric of daily life. Long, rhythmic songs and epic poems were not merely for entertainment around a campfire. They were mnemonic devices, oral maps set to music. A single verse might describe a sequence of 3 unusual rock formations, followed by a dry riverbed that led to a hidden well. The rhyme and meter made the information unforgettable, allowing a traveler to sing their way across a featureless plain, each line confirming they were on the correct, life-sustaining path. This was how knowledge survived, not written on parchment, but carried in the minds and voices of generations, a melody that could guide you home from the ends of the earth. That celestial map in the stars and the songs in the sand all led to one ultimate prize: water. The true arteries of the Silk Road were not the well-trodden paths, but a hidden network of secret oases. Their locations were more valuable than gold, and knowledge of them was a form of immense power, fiercely guarded by the local tribes and caravan masters who controlled the flow of trade. Revealing the position of a secluded spring could hand a rival the keys to a kingdom, so these vital waypoints were kept off any official map, their existence passed down in whispers. This secrecy was a deliberate strategy. By controlling the water, a powerful tribe could control the merchants, dictating the routes they traveled and demanding hefty taxes for the privilege of survival. An oasis was not just a source of water, it was a strategic fortress, a toll gate in the middle of a desert, and its secrecy was its primary defense. So how did a lost traveler, without a guide or a secret ledger, hope to find what was intentionally hidden? They learned to read the desert's subtle signatures. They knew to watch the sky at dawn and dusk, not for stars but for birds. The flight patterns of specific doves or finches, especially in the cool of the morning, often pointed unerringly toward a water source, sometimes dozens of miles distant. These birds were living compasses, and following them required immense patience and a deep understanding of their behavior. On the ground, the search became even more tactile. An experienced guide would walk the dry riverbeds, known as wadis, that carve through the landscape. They would search for the telltale signs of specific, deep-rooted vegetation, like tamarisk trees or certain reeds, whose very existence hinted at moisture trapped not far below the surface. The very texture and color of the sand could change where water lay hidden. Then came the most desperate and skillful act, the dig. They knew to dig not in the center of the dry riverbed, but along its outer bends, where during rare floods, water would sink deepest into the gravel and sand. They would excavate carefully, sometimes for hours, until the ground grew damp and cool, and eventually a trickle of muddy, life-giving water would pool at their feet. This was the ultimate secret knowledge, the ability to coax water from stone and sand, to see a map not drawn on any parchment, but written in the flight of a bird and the bend of a dry river. Water was life, but the journey to secure it required an even more precious commodity, protection. For every caravan laden with silk and spice, there moved a small army of hired blades, the mercenary guards whose sole purpose was to ensure those treasures reached their destination. These were not soldiers of a king, but men of the road, masters of a brutal and highly specialized form of combat. Their arsenal was not built for the open battlefield, but for the close quarter chaos of an ambush in a narrow mountain pass or a sudden raid on a dusty plain. The curved scimitar was their signature weapon, its design a product of harsh experience. The slashing arc of its blade was perfectly suited for fighting from camelback or horseback, allowing a guard to strike with devastating force while remaining in motion. Alongside these, they carried composite bows, crafted from layers of wood, horn, and sinew. These were not the longbows of European forests, but shorter, incredibly powerful weapons designed to be fired accurately from a moving animal, unleashing a storm of arrows against horseback raiders before they could close in. Their most crucial piece of equipment, however, was often the simplest, a small, round shield made of hardened leather or woven reeds. Light enough to not slow them down on a long march, it was their primary defense against the thrown rocks, sling bullets, and arrows that were the bandits' favored tools for harassing a column from a distance. Their tactics were as refined as their weapons. They never planned for a static defense. A caravan was a moving fortress, and its protection relied on constant, fluid motion. Scouts rode far ahead, scanning the horizon for the telltale dust clouds that signaled approaching riders. The most valuable cargo was always placed in the center of the column, surrounded by a rotating cordon of guards. When an attack came, they did not chase the bandits into the desert, a sure way to be led into a trap. Instead, they formed a defensive ring, a mobile perimeter of shields and scimitars, creating a wall of deterrence around the precious camels and their loads. Their goal was not to annihilate the enemy, but to make the cost of the attack too high, to convince the raiders that this particular caravan was a target not worth the bloodshed. This leads to the most shadowy secret of the road, the unspoken agreements that often govern survival. It was an open secret that some caravan masters, through their guards as intermediaries, would negotiate with the very bandit clans that threatened them. A pre-arranged payment, a toll paid in silver or goods, could secure safe passage through a certain valley or past a specific mountain range. This was not seen as cowardice, but as a brutal form of commerce. Why risk the lives of your men and the loss of your entire cargo in a bloody fight when a smaller, calculated payment could guarantee peace? The guards were therefore not just fighters, they were also diplomats in a world without laws, negotiators who understood that sometimes the most powerful weapon was a pouch of coins and a quiet conversation in the dark. Their real skill lay in knowing when to draw the scimitar and when to open the purse, a delicate balance that kept the wheels of commerce turning across a continent. A caravan's true wealth was measured not just in silk and silver, but in the simple, life-sustaining power of its food supply. The journey demanded sustenance that could withstand months of scorching days and freezing nights, a challenge that forced travelers to become masters of culinary preservation. Their most common solution was to remove the one thing every spoiling agent needed: water. In the dry, high air of the mountain passes and the relentless desert sun, they sliced meat into thin strips, salting it heavily before hanging it to dry completely. This was not merely jerky. This was biltong, a science of preservation that created a protein-rich food that could last for an entire year, needing no fire to cook and taking up minimal space in a saddlebag. For their carbohydrates, they turned to the simplest of recipes: hardtack. These were biscuits made from nothing more than flour, water, and sometimes a little salt, baked until every drop of moisture was driven out. The result was a rock-hard slab that could, quite literally, last for years. It was inedible on its own, of course. A traveler would often have to soak a piece in his morning tea or break it into a stew to soften it enough to eat, a small price to pay for a food that would not mold or rot. And for those traveling the northern steppe routes, another miracle of preservation was essential. They carried fermented dairy, like kumis, which was made from mare's milk. By fermenting it, they not only preserved it far longer than fresh milk would last, but they also created a tangy, slightly effervescent drink that was rich in nutrients and probiotics, a vital source of vitamins on a monotonous journey. But no caravan could carry all the food it needed. Survival often depended on the ability to read the land like a grocery store. Experienced travelers possessed a deep, unwritten knowledge of botany. They knew which wild grasses had edible seeds, which desert roots could be dug up and roasted, and which berries were safe to eat. They foraged for onions and garlic, not just for flavor, but for their natural antibacterial properties. In the most dire circumstances, when supplies ran dangerously low, this knowledge expanded to include the smallest of creatures. They knew which beetles, grubs, and locusts were safe to consume, a rich source of fat and protein when all other options had vanished. This was not a desperate act of starvation, but a calculated survival strategy. A specific type of grasshopper, roasted over a small fire, or certain ant larvae gathered from a rotten log, could provide the energy needed to reach the next oasis. Every meal was a testament to human ingenuity, a balance between what you carried and what the earth provided, a silent agreement between the traveler and the treacherous, beautiful land he crossed. The caravan's survival depended on more than just well-armed guards and carefully preserved food. Its true engine was an invisible current of trust and credit, a financial network as complex as any in the modern world. A merchant setting out from Venice to Beijing could not possibly carry all the gold coins he would need for a journey lasting years. The weight would be immense, and the risk of robbery was constant. Instead, he relied on a revolutionary system of paper promises. Before his departure, he would deposit a sum of gold with a trusted banking family in his home city. In return, he received a carefully written letter of credit. This single piece of parchment was his key to the entire Silk Road. Upon reaching a major trading hub like Samarkand, he would present his letter to a correspondent banker, a man linked by faith and family to the house back home. After verifying the complex seals and signatures, that banker would advance him local currency, deducting a small fee for the service. This was the bill of exchange, a financial instrument that allowed vast sums of wealth to travel across continents without a single coin ever leaving a secure vault. It was a system built on reputation and intricate, long-distance relationships. A merchant's most valuable asset was not the silk in his pack, but his good name in the ledgers of these international financiers. To default on a debt was to be blacklisted, cut off from the lifeblood of credit that made such immense journeys possible. This web of trust enabled commerce on a previously unimaginable scale. Yet, within this sophisticated system, there was always room for deception. The men who operated the currency exchange stalls in bustling marketplaces were masters of a different kind of art. Their entire livelihood depended on their ability to assess value instantly and often, to manipulate it in their favor. When a merchant needed to convert his Venetian ducats into local Kashgar coppers, the money changer would perform a familiar ritual. He would take a coin, bring it to his teeth, and bite down firmly. This was not a pointless gesture. A pure gold or silver coin is a relatively soft metal. If his teeth left a clear impression, it was a good sign the coin was genuine and not a forgery made from a harder base metal. A coin that resisted the bite was immediately suspect. These men also employed hidden scales, tiny, precise balances kept out of sight beneath their counters. They would weigh each coin a customer offered, knowing that worn down or deliberately shaved coins contained less precious metal and were therefore less valuable. But their greatest trick was their secret knowledge of exchange rates. The official rate might be one thing, but the real rate, the one they shared only with trusted associates or used to exploit a traveler's ignorance, was often quite different. They maintained mental ledgers of fluctuating values, knowing that a rumor of a distant war could make one currency plummet and another soar. A merchant from the West, desperate for local coins to pay a toll or buy supplies, might find himself on the wrong end of a hidden exchange rate, paying far more in ducats than he should have for the coppers he received. This shadow game of finance was a constant duel of wits. A savvy merchant learned to bite his own coins, to carry his own small scale, and to cultivate friendships with local traders who could whisper the true rates before he approached the changer's stall. The greatest dangers on the Silk Road were not always found in the desert, but in the quiet deceit of a smiling man and his perfectly balanced scales. While merchants calculated profits and guards watched for bandits, another kind of traveler moved along the Silk Road with a very different purpose. These were the pilgrims, men and women driven not by wealth, but by faith, and their survival depended on a unique spiritual toolkit. Buddhist monks, Nestorian Christian missionaries, and other devout wanderers carried secrets far more precious than silk or spice. Their most sacred treasures were hidden in plain sight. A monk from China, walking toward the great Buddhist centers of India, might have sacred sutras, the words of the Buddha himself, carefully transcribed onto long, narrow scrolls. These were not packed with the common goods. Instead, they were sewn into the lining of his heavy robes or concealed within a hollowed-out staff. A Christian missionary from the West might carry a tiny fragment of a saint's bone, a relic wrapped in cloth and tucked into a small pouch worn around his neck. These items were not just articles of faith. They were sources of profound psychological strength, physical tokens of a divine connection that made the unbearable journey possible. Their endurance was not merely physical, it was a discipline of the mind. For the Buddhist monk, the endless walking was a form of meditation in motion. With each step, he would practice mindfulness, focusing on the sensation of his foot touching the earth, the rhythm of his breath, the feeling of the wind against his skin. This constant, gentle attention pulled his mind away from the blisters on his feet, the gnawing hunger in his stomach, and the terrifying vastness of the desert. It transformed a grueling trek into a walking prayer. Christian pilgrims, too, had their mental armor. They would recite psalms and prayers in a steady, chanting rhythm, their voices creating a protective bubble of sacred sound against the isolating silence of the mountains. This repetitive chanting was a powerful tool against despair, a way to fill the mind with purposeful thought and crowd out the whispers of fear and loneliness. But these pilgrims were far more than solitary holy men. They became the unofficial diplomats of the Silk Road. In a world of clashing cultures and languages, a pilgrim was often seen as a neutral figure. A Buddhist monk could gain an audience with a Mongol Khan, and a Nestorian priest could find hospitality in a Zoroastrian village. Their perceived lack of political or commercial ambition made them trustworthy. As they traveled, they became living libraries of information. A monk arriving in a new city would share not only his religious teachings, but also news from distant lands. He might describe a new ruler in Samarkand, report on the conditions of a mountain pass after a harsh winter, or even carry a verbal message from one monastery to another. They were the internet of the ancient world, a human network transmitting ideas, news, and cultural practices across continents. The pilgrim's journey was an inner and outer saga, where the strength to cross a continent was found not in a sword or a ledger, but in a silent prayer and a hidden scroll. The pilgrim's sacred journey and the merchant's caravan both relied on a shadow currency more powerful than any coin, the carefully calculated bribe. This was not a matter of simple corruption, but a deeply ingrained system of obligatory payments that kept the entire machine of the Silk Road moving. For every official at a border checkpoint, every local chieftain controlling a mountain pass, and every garrison commander at a city gate, a toll was expected beyond the official tax. An experienced caravan master understood this not as an ethical dilemma, but as a fundamental cost of doing business. His secret ledger did not just track goods, it meticulously recorded these necessary gratuities, a detailed price list for passage across a continent. The currency of these exchanges was as varied as the road itself. Silver coins were always welcome, but they were also traceable and heavy. More often, bribes took the form of the very goods being transported. A few bolts of the finest silk, presented discreetly to a governor's wife, could secure a caravan's immediate entry into a city, bypassing a customs inspection that might last for weeks. A small chest of pungent cloves or a delicate porcelain cup, gifted to the captain of a fortress guard, could ensure safe passage through a notoriously dangerous gorge. For the most powerful and difficult to impress officials, the bribes grew more exotic. A merchant might promise a future favor, a guaranteed discount on the next season's spice shipment, binding the official to his financial future. There are even records of rare animals, like hunting falcons or unusual songbirds, being offered as gifts to sultans and kings, a bribe disguised as a tribute of admiration. The true art, however, lay not in the offering, but in the targeting. A novice might try to bribe a low-ranking soldier, a wasteful and often dangerous mistake. The seasoned traveler, guided by his ledger and his network of contacts, knew precisely which official held the real power. He sought out the senior customs scribe, not the junior one, for the scribe controlled the paperwork that could delay a caravan for months. He identified the local tax collector's most trusted assistant, the man who did the actual assessments and could quietly reduce the declared value of a shipment. These payments were never made publicly. They occurred in quiet back rooms, accompanied by cups of tea and flowery language that never mentioned the transaction directly. It was a dance of implication and understanding. A merchant would speak of his deep respect for the official's diligent work and the hardships of his post, then gesture to a small, unmarked chest being carried into the room by his servant. The official would nod, acknowledging the merchant's wisdom and generosity. The unspoken agreement was clear: payment for swift, uncomplicated passage. To refuse this system was to invite financial ruin. A caravan that did not pay the expected gratuities would find itself subjected to endless inspections. Every camel load would be meticulously unpacked and searched, a process that could take days. Goods might be damaged, stolen, or deemed illegal on a technicality and confiscated. The delay itself was a death sentence, causing a merchant to miss crucial trading seasons and depleting his food and water supplies. In this light, the bribe was not seen as a sin, but as an investment in efficiency, a necessary lubricant for the creaking wheels of bureaucracy and power. It was the dark, practical secret that every successful traveler mastered, the art of turning a portion of one's wealth into the key that unlocked the next 1,000 miles of road. A whispered conversation in a smoky tavern could be worth more than a dozen armed guards. This was the shadow economy of information, a desperate trade in rumors about the road ahead. Travelers understood that the greatest threat was not the desert itself, but the men who prowled its edges, waiting for the rich and the weary. To survive, you needed an early warning system, and that system ran on coded messages and hushed gossip exchanged in the caravanserais, the fortified inns that dotted the route. A merchant sipping his tea might casually ask about the price of fodder in the next town. The answer, a simple number, could secretly correspond to the estimated size of a bandit gang known to operate near that very place. A traveler might comment on the strange behavior of the local birds, a prearranged signal that a certain mountain pass was currently unsafe. These were not overt declarations, but a subtle language of survival spoken between those in the know. The most vital intelligence often came from the most unexpected sources, the storytellers and musicians who performed in these crowded courtyards. Their songs and epic tales were not just entertainment, they were frequently peppered with recent news, veiled reports of ambushes or the movements of warlords, delivered to an entire audience under the guise of fiction. You learned to listen not just to the melody, but to the specific details of the story, for a mention of a black wolf in the northern hills might be the only warning you would ever get. But information was a double-edged sword. The very whispers that could save you could also be planted by the bandits themselves, designed to lure a caravan onto a more vulnerable path. This constant game of deception gave rise to one of the riskiest and most clever strategies, the decoy caravan. A wealthy merchant, fearing for his most precious cargo of jewels or rare incense, would sometimes finance a second, smaller caravan. This decoy would travel a day or two ahead of the real one, laden with cheap goods and a few hired men. It was a sacrificial lamb, designed to attract the attention of any raiders. When the bandits inevitably swept down upon the decoy, finding only worthless cargo, the main caravan, following at a safe distance, would receive the signal, often a column of dark smoke rising in the distance, and quickly alter its course, slipping past the ambush site while the thieves were still occupied. This was a brutal calculation, a willingness to sacrifice a small part of your wealth and the safety of a few men to protect the whole. Yet, the most chilling danger was not the stranger in the hills, but the friend in your own camp. The fear of internal betrayal was a constant, gnawing anxiety for every caravan master. A bandit attack that seemed perfectly timed, that knew exactly which camel carried the most valuable silks, often pointed to a traitor within the ranks. A disgruntled guard, bribed with a share of the future loot, might leave a specific mark on a rock at a campsite, signaling that this was the caravan to hit. A porter, whose family was being threatened by a local bandit chief, might secretly loosen the ropes on a precious load, ensuring it would fall and be left behind in the chaos of a fake accident. This paranoia created an atmosphere of intense suspicion. Caravan masters employed their own network of loyal spies within the crew, men who would listen for loose talk and watch for unusual behavior. They would deliberately spread false information about their route or the contents of certain packs to different groups within the caravan, waiting to see which lie reached the bandits' ears. To travel the Silk Road was to navigate a landscape where every smiling face could hide a secret allegiance, and your greatest salvation often lay in trusting no one completely. A secret far more explosive than silk escaped China's borders not in a princess's hair, but in the hands of captured soldiers. The year was 751, and on the banks of the Talas River, an army of the Chinese Tang dynasty clashed with the forces of the expanding Abbasid Caliphate. The battle itself was a brutal, chaotic affair, but its most profound consequence was not a shift in territory. It was the moment two civilizations collided, and a single, priceless technology was violently wrenched from its cradle. Among the thousands of Chinese soldiers taken prisoner were men who were not just warriors, but artisans. They were masters of a craft the Chinese had perfected over centuries, the art of making paper. For the Abbasids, this was a discovery of staggering importance. They saw in these prisoners the key to a revolution. Before this, the Islamic world, like much of Europe, relied on parchment made from scraped and treated animal skins. Producing a single book required the skins of hundreds of sheep or calves, making books prohibitively expensive and knowledge the exclusive domain of the wealthy and powerful. Paper made from pulped rags, tree bark, and hemp was a democratizing force they could scarcely comprehend. Imagine the scene in a Samarkand workshop after the battle. An Abbasid overseer stands with a captured papermaker. A man who knows his life depends on the value of the secret he holds. The process was a form of alchemy. The Chinese artisans showed their captors how to take old linen rags and hemp ropes, materials that were cheap and plentiful, and beat them into a soft, pulpy mush in water-filled vats. They demonstrated the use of a fine mesh screen, dipping it into the murky water and lifting it out with a perfectly even, thin layer of fiber. After the water drained away, what remained was a fragile, wet sheet that, once pressed and dried, became a smooth, durable, and incredibly versatile surface for writing. This was not a voluntary transfer of knowledge. It was industrial aspiracy conducted at sword point. The captured papermakers, under duress, had to reveal every step, from the correct preparation of the pulp to the precise method of drying the sheets. The Abbasids, brilliant administrators and scholars in their own right, did not simply copy the technique, they industrialized it. They established the first paper mills outside of China, harnessing water wheels to power the heavy stamping hammers that pulped the fibers, dramatically increasing production. The secret was out, and it would now travel with the speed of a desert caravan. From Samarkand, papermaking spread swiftly to Baghdad, the dazzling capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. There, in the legendary House of Wisdom, where scholars translated the works of the Greeks and Persians, paper became the engine of an intellectual golden age. It allowed for the cheap, rapid copying of texts on a scale parchment could never allow. The flow of knowledge accelerated exponentially. This humble, practical technology, born from conflict and captivity, would slowly make its way across North Africa into Muslim Spain. By the 12th century, paper mills were operating in the Spanish city of Zadova, placing this revolutionary material at the very gates of Europe. It was paper, more than any other single invention, that would eventually fuel the European Renaissance and the scientific revolution, enabling the widespread distribution of ideas that challenged old dogmas. The course of human history was fundamentally altered not by a peaceful trade, but by the desperate, forced confession of a secret, pried from the hands of prisoners of war on a forgotten Central Asian battlefield. The most successful merchants on the Silk Road understood a simple truth, that the best way to protect a treasure was to make it invisible. They mastered the art of camouflage, turning their most precious cargo into objects of utter insignificance. A merchant carrying a fortune in raw amber or unset jewels would not pack them in a locked chest. Instead, he might commission a local woodworker to hollow out a simple walking staff, filling the core with the gems before sealing the ends with wax and dirt. A shipment of valuable spices could be concealed inside a seemingly ordinary load of firewood. The fragrant peppercorns or cinnamon sticks stuffed into logs that had been split and hollowed out, then neatly tied back together. The goal was to create a perfect illusion of poverty. A caravan laden with rough-hewn timber or sacks of common grain was of no interest to a bandit scanning the horizon for silks and silver. This philosophy of deception extended to the very clothes they wore. A wealthy spice trader, fearing his fine robes would mark him as a target, would often travel in the worn, coarse wool of a pilgrim or a refugee. He would rub dust into his face and hands, and walk with the tired, shuffling gait of a man who had nothing left to lose. His most valuable assets were not in his saddlebags, but woven into the fabric of his disguise. Gold, the heaviest and most tempting prize, was frequently spun into thin thread and then woven directly into the bland, undyed wool of a blanket or a cloak. To any observer, it was a simple, threadbare garment, but to the merchant, it was a portable bank, a fortune in precious metal he could slowly unravel and trade at his destination. This practice of hiding wealth in textiles was so common that it extended to the grandest of caravans. A shipment of the finest Chinese silk, a gleaming, iridescent fabric that shouted its value, would often be packed at the very bottom of a camel's load. It would be covered over with layers of cheap, rough-spun cotton or smelly animal hides. A thief making a quick grab would take the top layers and run, never realizing the true prize lay buried beneath the dross. This was a calculated risk, a bet that most criminals were too rushed or too greedy to conduct a thorough search. The entire strategy relied on a deep understanding of human psychology. Thieves and tax collectors were looking for obvious signs of wealth. They would look for guarded chests, for merchants wearing rings, for camels straining under loads of lightweight, precious silks. By presenting the exact opposite image, a caravan of apparent paupers carrying only the most basic supplies, these travelers disarmed suspicion before it could even form. They moved through the world not as kings of commerce, but as ghosts, their greatest secrets hidden in the dull, uninteresting objects that no one would ever think to steal. A merchant's disguise could fool bandits, but it offered no protection against the unseen forces that govern the road. For that, caravans turned to a different kind of expert, the astrologer soothsayer. These were not mere fortune tellers. They were vital consultants who blended celestial science with ancient divination to guide critical decisions. Their primary role was to choose the most auspicious day for a caravan's departure, a calculation far more complex than checking the weather. They would spend nights charting the slow dance of the planets, looking for favorable alignments. If Mars, the bringer of conflict, was dominant in a certain house of the sky, they might advise a delay, predicting a higher risk of bandit attacks. A specific configuration of Venus and the Moon, however, could signal a window of safe passage and profitable trade. This celestial forecasting was paired with more visceral practices. Before a major decision, a soothsayer might sacrifice a sheep or a goat, not as a religious offering, but as a diagnostic tool. He would carefully examine the animal's entrails, the liver in particular, reading the patterns of the lobes and any unusual spots or discolorations. A healthy, well-formed liver was a green light, a sign from the world itself that the journey should proceed. A malformed or diseased organ was an immediate red flag, a warning of disaster ahead that no caravan master could afford to ignore. These men also served as the caravan's psychologists, interpreting the dreams of merchants and guards. A guard's nightmare about a collapsing mountain was not dismissed as simple fear. It was analyzed as a potential omen of an avalanche in a specific pass or the fall of a powerful patron in the next city. By giving a name to these vague anxieties, the soothsayer transformed paralyzing fear into a manageable risk. He provided a narrative, a reason for the unease that everyone felt, and a prescribed ritual to overcome it. This psychological comfort was his most valuable product. When a strange omen appeared, like a flock of birds flying in an unusual pattern, the sorologer did not simply declare it bad luck. He would decipher its meaning and then prescribe a counter-ritual, a specific chant, or a small offering to be left at the next crossroads, effectively neutralizing the bad fortune in the minds of the travelers. This restored their confidence, allowing them to move forward without the burden of dread. In a world where lightning could strike without reason and a sandstorm could erase an entire caravan, the soothsayer offered the illusion of control. He translated the chaos of the unknown into a language of symbols and rituals, giving frightened men the courage to take the next step into the great, terrifying, and beautiful unknown. A caravan master's authority meant nothing without the silent, steady strength of his animals. The true unsung heroes of the Silk Road were the handlers, the men and women whose whispered commands and gentle hands kept the great beasts of burden moving. Their wisdom was a science passed down through generations, a deep, intuitive understanding of the creatures that were their partners in survival. They were veterinarians of the wilderness, diagnosing ailments with a touch and a look long before any visible symptoms appeared. They knew that a camel's drooping ear or a slight change in the rhythm of its chewing was the first whisper of a fever. A horse that repeatedly turned its head to nip at its own flank was not being irritable. It was signaling the early stages of a painful colic. For every ailment, the desert itself provided a remedy. These handlers carried pouches of dried herbs gathered from barren-looking slopes. They knew which bitter-tasting root, when ground into a paste and mixed with water, could soothe a camel's inflamed footpad. They understood that a certain silvery-leafed plant, found only in the shadow of specific rocks, could bring down a raging infection. This was not magic, it was accumulated knowledge, a living pharmacy carried in their saddlebags. Their most crucial skill, however, was preventing exhaustion, the silent killer that could cripple a caravan as surely as any bandit's arrow. A handler did not wait for an animal to collapse. He read the subtle language of fatigue in the way a yak lowered its head, in the slight stumble of a horse on flat ground, or in the diminished output of a camel's milk. He knew the precise moment to lighten a load, to call for an unscheduled rest, and to administer a restorative mix of salt and grain, but their mastery extended beyond mere health. It reached into the realm of stealth. In the vast silence of the desert night, the sound of a nervous horse whinnying or a camel's guttural groan could carry for miles, acting as a dinner bell for every predator and raider in the valley. To counter this, handlers employed a form of psychological training that began when the animals were young. They acclimated them to sudden noises and strange shadows by night, rewarding calm behavior with handfuls of favorite treats. They developed a system of soft, consistent touches, a language of reassurance that could soothe a spooked animal without a single spoken word. For particularly valuable or skittish pack animals, they sometimes used a gentle muzzle made of woven leather, not to prevent eating, but to stifle any sudden, betraying sounds. The most disciplined caravans moved through the darkness in near total silence, a ghostly procession of men and beasts guided only by the stars and the quiet, confident hands of those who knew that their survival depended on the well-being of their four-legged companions. Hidden within the caravan master's secret ledger was another layer of deliberate deception, this one etched onto parchment and vellum. The most trusted maps of the ancient world were often beautiful lies. Cartographers, often in the employ of powerful trading guilds or royal courts, engaged in a silent conspiracy to protect the sources of their wealth. They would draw vast, impassable mountain ranges where only rolling hills existed, creating the illusion of a barrier that would deter rivals from seeking a shorter route. A critical oasis, the only water source for 100 miles, might be completely omitted from the chart, or its location subtly shifted by a few dozen miles into a dead-end canyon. On these maps, distances were a fluid concept. A profitable, well-controlled stretch of the route might appear short and easy, encouraging travelers to use it, while a rival's path was depicted as a long, treacherous loop. This was not a matter of poor geography, it was a calculated strategy of misinformation. The map was a weapon, designed to funnel trade along profitable corridors and starve competing routes of traffic. For a traveler holding such a document, its greatest danger was its appearance of authority. The ornate illustrations and precise script gave it an air of absolute truth, making its falsehoods all the more lethal. To navigate this landscape of intentional error, a merchant had to become a detective. He could not trust any single source of information. He would study the flawed official map, then compare it against the sung poems of the local guides, the oral traditions that preserved a more accurate, if less precise, geography. He would then layer this with the hard-won experience etched into his own memory, the recollection of a specific rock formation that the map showed a day's journey away, but that he knew appeared just after midday. His true map was a living mental collage, pieced together from whispered warnings, the scars on his camel's feet, and the bitter taste of water from a spring the cartographers had sworn did not exist. The journey, therefore, was not just a physical trial, but a constant test of judgment, a process of sifting truth from a world designed to deceive him. A caravan master's secret ledger could not protect him from the deadliest threat on the open steppe, the sudden appearance of dust on the horizon signaling not bandits, but a patrol of Parthian horse archers. These warriors possessed a combat secret so devastating it would echo through the centuries, a technique known to history as the Parthian shot. While riding away at a full gallop, an archer could twist his entire body in the saddle, aim, and fire a deadly accurate shot backward over his horse's hindquarters. This was not a trick of chance, but a masterwork of coordinated skill, a product of a lifetime spent in the saddle. The archer's strength and balance were only part of the equation. His true weapon was his composite bow, a marvel of engineering crafted from layers of wood, sinew, and horn. This design gave the bow immense power in a relatively short frame, allowing it to be drawn and fired effectively even in the confined, chaotic motion of a twisting turn. The Parthians did not invent this shot in isolation. It was a tactical secret that flowed along the Silk Road, a piece of lethal knowledge traded and adapted in the same way as spices or silk. A mercenary guard from the Roman frontiers, having witnessed the tactic's brutal effectiveness, might describe it in a caravanserai to a fellow soldier from the steppes. A captured weapon, taken from a fallen rider, would be studied, its construction meticulously reverse-engineered by enemy armorers. The technique itself was a form of intellectual property, learned and perfected through observation and practice. Nomadic tribes from the Scythians to the Huns all developed their own versions of this feigned retreat and sudden backward strike. The Parthian shot was more than an archery technique. It was a complete revolution in battlefield psychology. A heavily armed Roman legion, accustomed to facing an enemy that stood and fought, would find itself utterly confounded. The horse archers would swarm, unleash a volley of arrows, and then seemingly break and flee in a chaotic rout. The disciplined Roman lines would naturally push forward, believing they had secured victory, only to watch in horror as the fleeing riders seamlessly pivoted in their saddles and transformed their retreat into a lethal storm of arrows raining down on the pursuing troops. This was a tactical virus that spread along the trade routes, infecting the armies of every empire it touched. The Romans, after suffering catastrophic defeats, were forced to abandon their traditional infantry-heavy tactics and recruit their own mercenary horse archers from the very cultures that had mastered the art of the shot. They learned to counter mobility with mobility, a painful but necessary adaptation. The Byzantine Empire later formalized these hard-won lessons into military manuals, detailing how to employ their own cavalry to counter the feigned retreat. This single, fluid motion of a rider turning in his saddle did not just win battles. It toppled military doctrines, redrew the boundaries of empires, and proved that the most dangerous cargo carried on the Silk Road was not a physical good, but a radical and unforgiving idea. Behind the high, mud brick walls of a caravanserai, a far more intricate trade was conducted than the simple exchange of goods. These fortified inns were the nerve centers of the Silk Road's invisible empire, where information was the most valuable currency, and the innkeeper was its master. He was far more than a simple host. He was a spy master, a confidant, and a gatekeeper. His ledger did not just track payments for rooms and fodder. It contained coded entries that noted which merchants were trustworthy, which guards were for hire, and which officials were susceptible to a well-placed bribe. His knowledge was a form of power, and he wielded it with discretion. For a traveler arriving from the desolation of the desert, the caravanserai was a sanctuary, but it was also a labyrinth of potential danger. A whispered conversation in the wrong corner could be overheard by a rival's agent, and a careless question could mark you as a target. The innkeeper managed this delicate ecosystem. He knew which rooms were truly secure, their walls thick and their doors far from the bustling central courtyard. He understood the acoustics of his own building, knowing where sound carried and where it was swallowed by stone. For a regular client or one bearing the correct token, he would assign a chamber where secrets could be shared without fear. He also served as a living post office, a vital node in a continent-spanning communication network. A merchant from Constantinople, heading east, could leave a sealed message with the innkeeper, who would safely store it for months, even years, until the intended recipient, a partner traveling from China, finally arrived and gave the prearranged passphrase. This system of delayed messaging allowed business to be conducted across vast distances and time, all built on the absolute trust in the innkeeper's integrity and his formidable memory. Within this environment, secret societies and trade guilds found fertile ground. A group of Persian jewel merchants might gather in a secluded upper room, their meeting disguised as a casual dinner. The innkeeper, having been paid for his silence and his vigilance, would ensure they were not disturbed. He might even send one of his own trusted servants to stand watch at the base of the stairs, a silent sentinel against prying eyes and ears. In this way, the caravanserai was the internet of its day, a place where data was uploaded, downloaded, and encrypted in the minds of men, and where the price of a safe night's rest was often a piece of valuable gossip about the road ahead. While the innkeeper guarded secrets in his ledger, another kind of craftsman protected a formula that transformed light itself. The Romans had mastered the creation of clear, colorless glass, a substance so pure it was like capturing a piece of frozen air. This was not the bubbly, greenish glass of earlier times, but a brilliant, transparent material that could be formed into dazzling cups, bowls, and mosaic tiles. Its value in the Eastern markets was immense, for it mimicked the appearance of the most precious rock crystal, but could be crafted on a far grander scale. The secret to this alchemy lay in a specific, rare ingredient and a closely guarded firing process. Roman glassmakers knew that the common green or blue tint in glass came from tiny amounts of iron impurities in the sand. To achieve perfect clarity, they needed a source of nearly pure silica sand, but that alone was not enough. The true key was a mineral known as manganese dioxide. When added to the molten glass in just the right quantity and under intensely controlled heat, this mineral acted as a decolorizer, neutralizing the iron's green tint and resulting in a flawless, transparent sheet. This formula was a state secret, protected as fiercely as any military tactic. The locations of the best sand quarries and manganese sources were concealed, and the master glassmakers were often bound to their workshops, forbidden from traveling lest they take their knowledge with them. Yet, like the secret of silk, this knowledge was too fluid to be contained by empire. As Roman political power wavered, its artisans found themselves seeking new patrons in a changing world. Skilled glassmakers, their workshops crumbling with the empire, began a slow migration eastward along the very trade routes their glass had once traveled as a luxury good. They carried the formula not on a scroll, but in their hands and their memories, a living library of temperature and chemistry. These fleeing craftsmen found eager employment in the rising Persian Sasanian Empire. Persian artisans were already brilliant metalworkers, and they quickly absorbed the Roman techniques, but they did not simply copy them. They innovated, adding their own cultural signature. They began adding even higher levels of manganese, which sometimes gave their glass a faint amethyst hue when held to the light, a signature of early Persian luxury glass. They also perfected the art of facet cutting, using rotating stone wheels to carve intricate geometric patterns into the surface of the clear glass, making it sparkle and refract light in dazzling new ways. This fusion of Roman clarity and Persian artistry then flowed further east with the rise of the Islamic caliphates. In cities like Damascus and Baghdad, the science of glassmaking was studied, refined, and elevated to new heights. Islamic chemists wrote detailed treatises on the properties of manganese and other decolorizers, systematically documenting the recipes that the Romans had kept locked in tradition. They began producing not just vessels, but also the first clear glass windows for mosques and palaces, and they pioneered the art of staining that clear base with metallic oxides to create the brilliant blues and reds of Islamic mosaic glass. The journey of this single secret, from a guarded Roman workshop to a global revolution in art and architecture, shows that the most enduring cargo on the Silk Road was not the object itself, but the hidden knowledge of how to create it, a spark carried in the mind of a single traveling artisan that could illuminate the world. The most lethal traveler on the Silk Road carried no weapons and sought no profit. It was an unseen stowaway, a bacterium hitching a ride in the fur of a black rat, or nestled within the fibers of a woolen carpet. The very interconnectedness that made the route a marvel of human achievement also transformed it into a superhighway for pandemic. Merchants and pilgrims, moving with their goods and animals, unknowingly transported pathogens across continents, delivering death to populations with no natural immunity. The bubonic plague, which would later erupt in Europe as the Black Death, likely began its long journey in the rodent colonies of Central Asia. From there, it traveled west in the grain sacks feeding the caravan animals, and in the very timbers of the ships that carried Silk Road goods into Mediterranean ports. An entire continent was linked by commerce, and so it became linked by shared suffering. The speed of trade was now matched by the speed of transmission, as a disease could cross from China to the Caspian Sea in the time it took a single merchant to complete his round trip. Some rulers, observing the terrifying patterns, began to suspect a connection. They noticed that outbreaks of strange new illnesses often appeared in cities shortly after the arrival of large caravans from specific regions. In response, they devised the world's first crude quarantine systems. In the 14th century, the port of Ragusa on the Adriatic Sea decreed that all ships arriving from suspected plague zones had to anchor at a nearby island for 40 days before any person or cargo could come ashore. This period, called a quarantino from the Italian word for 40, was a desperate guess based on observation, a way to let the invisible fire burn itself out before it could reach the city. Further east, there are accounts of Mongol Khans ordering camps to be established a certain distance from their main settlements, where travelers from infected areas were forced to wait and prove their health before being allowed to enter. These measures were born of sheer desperation, a logical response to a mystery no one could yet understand. They had no knowledge of germs or vectors, only the chilling correlation between new trade and new graves. The Silk Road's greatest legacy was not just the exchange of art and ideas, but the unwitting unification of the world's immune systems, a painful and profound step toward the global village we know today, forged in the silence of a dying breath. The dust of the caravans settled not just on silk and spice, but on beliefs carried like hidden treasures in the hearts of travelers. Alongside merchants and mercenaries moved missionaries and mystics, spreading spiritual ideas that official empires often sought to suppress. To avoid persecution, these faiths learned to travel in disguise, their rituals conducted in the secluded upper rooms of caravanserais or in caves just beyond the glow of the campfire. The Roman mystery cult of Mithras, centered on a divine hero who slays a cosmic bull, found dedicated followers among the Roman soldiers stationed at distant frontier outposts. These soldiers built secret underground temples, called Mithraea, where initiates progressed through 7 ranks in rituals of brotherhood and loyalty, a spiritual solace far from home. Yet, Mithras never traveled much further east. It was 2 other faiths that truly mastered the art of spiritual adaptation on the road. Nestorian Christianity, a branch of the faith that emphasized the human and divine natures of Christ as separate, was declared a heresy by the Church in Rome. For its followers, the Silk Road became a lifeline. Nestorian missionaries moved eastward, establishing communities all the way to China. A stone stele erected in the Chinese capital in the 8th century tells the story of their faith in both Chinese and Syriac, a stunning example of their reach. But to survive, they could not simply preach. They learned to translate their theology into terms a Buddhist or Taoist could understand. They spoke of Christ as a great enlightened teacher and described God the Father in ways that resonated with concepts of the Tao, the universal way. They built churches that, to an outsider, looked little different from local temples, blending architectural styles to avoid drawing hostile attention. An even more dramatic story of syncretism belongs to Manichaeism, a faith founded by the prophet Mani in the 3rd century. He intended it from the start to be a universal religion, a final synthesis of Zoroastrianism, Buddhism, and Christianity. This made it perfectly suited for the Silk Road. Manichaean missionaries were brilliant synthesizers. In a Zoroastrian region, they would emphasize the faith's core dualism of a world caught between light and darkness. When speaking to Buddhists, they would focus on its strict ethical codes and concepts of reincarnation. For Christians, they highlighted the figure of Jesus as a prophet of light. This chameleon-like quality was its greatest strength and its greatest peril. It was accepted in many places precisely because it looked so familiar. Yet it was also persecuted by Zoroastrian, Christian, and Muslim rulers who saw it as a heretical rival. Its followers became masters of secrecy, creating beautifully illuminated books that contained their complex cosmology, books that could be easily hidden or transported. In the twilight world of the trading post, these belief systems did not just exist side by side, they bled into one another. A Buddhist merchant from Chang'an, having shared a meal with a Nestorian trader, might begin to incorporate the Christian concept of a single creator God into his personal understanding of karma. A Zoroastrian fire worshipper, impressed by the Manichaean emphasis on a final battle between good and evil, might adopt some of its rituals. The caravanserai became a silent crucible of faith, where gods and doctrines met, mingled, and merged, creating hybrid beliefs that belonged to the road itself, a secret spiritual current flowing beneath the more visible trade in material goods. For every secret that survived the Silk Road, countless others were buried with their keepers beneath the shifting sands. The silent testimony of these lost travelers lies not in written accounts, but in the objects they left behind, a fragmented story told by bleached bones and forgotten trinkets. The mysterious Tarim mummies, discovered in the parched deserts of western China, are perhaps the most haunting of these echoes. These individuals, with their European features and brightly patterned woolen textiles, were preserved for thousands of years by the dry air. They were carrying seeds of wheat and millet from the west, and their very presence in such an isolated location rewrites our understanding of ancient migration. They speak of a journey begun but never finished, of a people who brought their farming techniques and their weaving patterns eastward, influencing the region's development long before the official Silk Road was named, only to vanish into the landscape themselves. Along the most desolate stretches of the route, archaeologists have unearthed smaller, more intimate tragedies. A single child-sized leather shoe, carefully stitched and then lost in a sudden sandstorm, hints at a family's desperate flight. A small hoard of Roman coins, deliberately hidden at the base of a distinctive rock and never recovered, tells of a merchant who planned to return for his treasure but was prevented by bandits, illness, or simple disorientation. These personal effects are the unspoken history of the road. A wooden comb, carved with a pattern unique to a village in Persia, found near a Chinese frontier fort, suggests a cultural exchange that happened on a human scale, far from the grand narratives of empires and caravans. These anonymous individuals, the ones who did not make it, were as instrumental in shaping the world as the most successful merchant. The seeds carried in their pockets could introduce a new crop to a distant valley. The design on a piece of broken pottery, traded at a forgotten campsite, could inspire a local artisan, creating a hybrid style that would endure for centuries. Their failed journeys redirected trade, their abandoned possessions introduced new technologies, and their very bones altered the genetic and cultural landscape of entire regions. They are the great anonymous contributors to our shared history, their legacy written not in ledgers, but in the quiet, enduring evidence they never intended to leave behind. The true treasure of the Silk Road was never a single spice or a bolt of silk. It was the vast, intricate web of secrets that made the journey possible at all. From the caravan master's coded ledger to the silent stone markers in the desert, survival was a collective art. It was the spice trader's tall tales and the pilgrim's hidden scriptures, the guard's feigned retreat and the soothsayer's ritual. This was not merely a path for moving goods, but a living, breathing conduit for the most powerful forces of human civilization. Along these routes, papermaking technology escaped China, revolutionary combat tactics spread between empires, and entire faiths adapted and merged in the shadows of caravanserais. The road itself was a mind, a network of shared and stolen knowledge that connected the world, transforming everything from what we eat to what we believe. Each secret you have discovered today was a vital thread in that tapestry. Now we turn the story over to you. Of all these hidden strategies for navigation, survival, and espionage, which one captured your imagination the most? Was it the financial system of paper credit, the deadly Parthian shot, or the princess who smuggled an entire industry in her hair? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this journey in the shadows of history, subscribe for more explorations into the world's greatest mysteries.